when I came into ownership of military images, wasn't quite sure what I was getting into. Chris was one of the...
You inherited me.
Yes, exactly. I inherited Chris. And he's been a very supportive individual and extremely helpful with getting started, and continues to be. And I overheard yesterday that Chris purchased or came into possession of your first Civil War photograph in 1962 during the...
50 cents.
For 50 cents.
You didn't have a little bit faded, but who knew?
So Chris is going to talk about Lincoln images, and let's give a warm welcome to Chris.
Water.
Yes, I got it right here.
You got some up there. Okay, thanks. Oh, great. There we go. Oh, good. Yeah, this is an IQ test now, so. Oh, great. So forward, back. Oh, amazing. Exciting. Good. Water. Yeah. Good thing my grandkids are out here because we just play with lasers the whole time. Well, thanks, Rod. It's an honor to talk to fellow addicts. And, people say I collect, I agglomerate, you know, and I've been agglomerating Lincoln stuff almost from the start, without really trying to. I just saw things that interested me. And early on, I built up a collection of what we at the time called fillers, you know, and it was kind of a condescending way, and a lot of the dealers and other collectors thought they were kind of junky, and they had the additional virtue of not costing all that much relative to other things. So it was fun to do, and you could rationalize spending the money on it. You know, starting in 1962, needless to say, if you just buy 2 or 3 a year, you end up with a hell of a lot of magazines after a while. And I've got my album over there of the current winnowing of Lincolns, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. My current real collecting focus is U.S. military buglers, their photographs, the bugles themselves, and of course, if you got that, you gotta have their uniform, you know. So come up to the man cave sometime, and you can play with Civil War through World War II if they have a medal time. So, and if any of you have any good bugler images, talk to me. Final advertisement. My wife's umpty great Civil War grandpa, John Flory, musician, 107th Ohio Volunteers, 11th Corps, was lucky enough to survive both Chancellorsville and Gettysburg. His diary said Stonewall Jackson run us pretty good. If you ever have a photograph of John Flory of the 107th Ohio, let me know. You're doing a good thing there. So, end of advertising. What are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about this. So I push to the right, and that was the first thing. Whoa! All right. We're going to talk about this guy. And we're going to start with this one because it's one of my favorite Brady's, and it has I think all the virtues of the Brady. It's a clear, beautifully produced image. The cardstock is good. Everything about it is good. So if you have to spend money to buy a Lincoln, buy one of these. You won't feel badly about it, and it's as nice as you're going to get. These are not rare, but just looking at what turns up on eBay and looking at what turns up at the shows, they're relatively rare. Because most of the time, apparently what happened was you were shown or you were offered back at the time things that were derived from the photographs of the prominent people. And that's what we're going to look at tonight. So I began with that one because to me that's sort of the acme of the Lincoln collecting. If you're going to spend some money, you want to have one really good Lincoln. You want something like that. It's a Brady. It's not a Brady Anthony. Those are okay, but they're not as good as Brady. So, next picture. This is the start, in a sense. That's the picture that Lincoln himself said helped make me president. Well, you know, I think Lincoln helped make himself president, but that wonderful photograph by Brady. That one is, all these are my collections, so I apologize for condition. It's not always pristine. You can tell it's a Brady. Oh boy, you can tell it's a Brady because of that little find. This was copied all over the world almost instantly. and they still turn up, so you shouldn't have to pay a ton if you want to have a copy of this. But if you want the real thing, it's going to cost you a little more, and you want to see the Brady on the column there. I have not seen them where they had his Brady on that. So that's what we got. But that's the number one of our talk, and we'll see more things of it. This is one of my favorites, but the reason we're showing it number 2 is, and I call it the Cowlick, and you can guess why. This, I think, just from observing over the years, as Yogi Berra said, you can observe a lot by watching. This is the most commonly copied or pirated or adapted of all the Lincoln photos. And I think we'll see some examples as we go along. That headshot turns up in cartoons, it turns up plonked on somebody else's body, it turns up reversed, it turns up all different kind of things. So photographers and publishers liked to use it. Possibly because it wasn't a Brady and a Gardner. It didn't have the strongest copyright protections. And it's actually, we're not really sure who took it. And there's 3 possible. James McLeay of Philadelphia, Digby Gorman, and C.D. Fredericks all issued this with their own back marks on it, all quite plausible, all equal level of quality. Mine's of McLeay, so I think McLeay's did it, right? But I think McLeay's at least was a photographer. Some of these other guys are just publishers, so who knows? But it's interesting to me that perhaps the most commonly pirated of all the Lincoln shots, we're not really sure who took it. It's fairly unusual. This one is absolutely iconic. And I've kept this one over the years because Anthony Berger was the completely excellent Brady assistant who took the photo. But in order to avoid being prosecuted for copyright infringement, because Brady apparently didn't turn it over to him, when he published it after Lincoln's death, that's what this is about. He took a little artist's license and messed around with the chair. And apparently, they didn't call it creative use in those days, but if the lawyers had known about it, they would have. That let you sort of look Brady or Gardner in the eye and say, this is mine, I take it from you. But this carte de visite, this pose, probably is the most common Civil War card you will ever find, and it certainly is on eBay in some form, either this one or, and there's also something else about it, it's kind of fun. It's the only known photograph of Lincoln wearing his glasses, which I hadn't noticed for 40 years, and then somebody pointed out to me and said, hey, it's the only one of him wearing his glasses that we know of. I think you frequently see people say, oh, that's the only known. Well, it's the only one we've seen. We don't know. Who knows? But anyway, so there's with his glasses, with Tad. He was a little bit embarrassed about this because apparently a lot of people tried to claim he was reading the Bible. He wasn't. It was the Brady album, the photographic album that he was looking at. And some of the pirated or adapted or creatively used versions of this had it to turn that into obviously a Bible-like book. So, but the real one is Brady. This is the chair artist rendering, so Berger could get away with using his own photograph. That is, as you can see, where it came from. This, I'm willing to bet you that 2/3 of the family albums in America in 1865, 66 had this one in there. Because if you get onto eBay today, just type in Abraham Lincoln CDV. Don't put Lincoln, because then you get all this great British CDVs from Lincoln, England, and all that. So type in Abraham Lincoln CDV. On any given day, you'll get 5 or 6 or 7 pages of them, and probably 15 or 20 variations of this one. Almost never with a back stamp, almost never with taking credit for it. But this one is a nice clear one, so I kept it. But you can see, it's Berger, isn't it? That's what we're looking
He has
But-
glasses on in that one too.
Well, you know, it's a good question. Let's see. What do you see?
I can see from here.
I've never seen them this big. It's kind of exciting. We'll have to look. The original is over there, so afterwards you can take a look. Victorian convention said that if a child or somebody in your family had died, you didn't show them directly in the family group. There's Willie up there. That apparently was okay to do that. So there's Willie working on it. So probably those two are the most common. Also, a lot of variations, including, again, artist embellishment. And this time, here's Willie, not with his face averted. That was the other way you did that. You could put him in there, of course, live, but he wouldn't be looking at you. Apparently, that preserved sensibilities. Good Victorians should never know. I can't see if there's specs on there now. Can you see if there's? So they probably didn't. You know. Anyway, so these three, that one.
It's all the same picture. They just artists did.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really when I first started collecting. These would have just been called fillers. Nobody would have taken them seriously. They'd been $5, $10, $15. So that became sort of the definition of a filler, something that the contemporary Civil War families and post-war families would buy to fill out their family album of their family and their regiments and their friends and the politicians that mattered to them. A lot of family albums you find politicians that are not famous now that they were at the time, and they almost all seem to have felt that it was okay to have one of Lincoln and his family, and the three that we've just been looking at are the ones you just see again and again and again. These you see under all different kinds of back marks, publishers taking credit for putting them out, and all that. I don't know who did the first one. This, now we're leaping ahead a bit, but we're ranking what turns up the most, and then we'll get back into the fillers. Needless to say, you can see what that is. You can see the copyright. I hope it's 1865. This was done very quickly, and I'm not sure every photo album in America had one of these, but I'll bet you most of them did. And if they didn't have that one, they had one of the 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 versions of this theme, and I've got them all over there. So if you're interested, I think you'll get a kick out of it. Some of them are. This is obviously an original bit of art that the publisher commissioned and had done. Several of them are that I didn't use because this is the most common. Several of them simply cut out, they got their sisters and cut out actual photographs of Lincoln, his head or part of his body or whatever, and pasted them on stuff. And they're fun and clunky, but they also show creative use of the existing photographs to do it. So this is the last one, I think, in my little series of, if you had a family album in 1865 or 1866, and you had a Lincoln, you probably had at least 2 of the ones we've just been looking at, including that one. And again, you go on eBay, on any given day, there's going to be 20 of those things. And it's the psychology is interesting because some dealers obviously pay attention and look at what they've looked before they list it and everything else. Others of them think, oh my God, I got a rare Lincoln, I've got $1,000, and you sort of, I sit them and say, look, you need to know this. It's nice and it's real, but calm down. It's worth about $25. They don't always want to hear that. Now, I can't tell you how thrilled I am to see that in enlargement. And I think it's a photo sleuth project, all right? To me, this is the quintessential filler. And I got it about 1.5 years ago. It wasn't cheap. I had to pay a ton for it. I've never seen it, ever. If any of you have ever seen it, let me know. It was put out by Holmes Park Gallery, 303 Broadway. Well, bless their hearts. Somebody did a hell of a lot of work with some scissors, and an outline of our guy. And since I haven't had a chance to look at it in a blow-up, I have no idea if Lincoln himself is in that. I'm too close to this. I'll never find out. But it certainly is Lincoln. So I thought it was just a really clever bit of creative use. And it couldn't be anybody else. Well, for next year, we'll get these guys all figured out. All right? There we go.
Let's do it.
Yeah, or go blind, one of the two. All right, that is there because it's my personal favorite.
Oh, yeah.
It's 1857, Alexander Hessler, Chicago. And this particular one is a favorite of mine because it's an 1880s reissue by Hessler himself, so it's still economically viable for him then. The quality of the card, and as I say, I urge you to go take a look at it, it's 2 or 3 times better than the Civil War paper. It's just a really nice bit of technical work. I think in looking at it, you know pretty sure that Mary didn't see him leave the house that morning. You know?
Having bad hair day.
Oh my God! You know, I just have loved that picture. And Lincoln used to joke about it, but we know from other stories and anecdotes he was absolutely indifferent to that kind of thing. So you can imagine, poor Mary must have been at her wit's end. You know, he knew he would wear pants and a shirt and all that thing, but comb his hair, no, obviously not. So that's my favorite, not Brady, not classic one, but it's a pre-war shot. But oh my God, this was also copied, and again there's one in there. Whoever copied it figured I gotta fix this hair, so he's much nicer looking. Anyway. This is an example of what was done to evade the Brady copyright, obviously. You recognize that. But you also could see it's not a photograph, it's a lithograph. It's a photograph of a lithograph, which is how you do these things. I mention that because a lot of dealers on eBay think that if it's a photograph, it's a photograph. So they go, oh, original Lincoln photograph. And, you know, and they put a Brady photograph price on it. So when I'm feeling obnoxious and nosy, I'll send them an email saying, look, you need to understand it's, you know, anyway, this one is fun because it's put out in England, and you can see they're being very even-handed. And one of the themes of my talk is not so much this picture or that picture, but the ones that I picked can be the starting point of an entire subcategory of collecting. This subcategory would be foreign publishing. And I just, before I came over, I said, well, and I looked at the ones in my album of Lincoln's. We've got Noureddin of Paris, we've got Charles Jacotin of Strasbourg, Palais Cavette of Rome, Ashford Brothers, London, Richardson, Lima, Peru, and several really good ones, William Mayer of Saint-Viet, which sure sounds French, and Jules Duplaquet of Paris, and this one is Ashford and Company, London. So you can have a final time building up an entire collection of probably every known Lincoln pose, and some that aren't known, put out overseas at the time. They're contemporary because foreigners wanted to know what's going on with these crazy Americans. You know, what are they doing?
We're still wondering.
Yeah. Because I say this one has the dual purpose of introducing you to that collecting topic, but also showing you what was done with artist rendering versions of the existing Bradys and Gardners and Burgers and all that. So, and this again is also getting ahead of us, but if you want to have a real original Lincoln, but don't want to spend 600, 700, 800 bucks a pop for a Brady, you can get this one. That has pretty much a good cross-section of all the good Brady or Gardner Bradys. And you shouldn't have to pay more than $150 or $240, I don't think. Hope I'm not stepping on anybody's toes here. But it's not rare, but if you just want to have that one, just go ahead. It just gives you a good cross-section. And it also introduces you to one of these subcategories. And that is, once Lincoln was dead, tragically, he became enormously popular, much more so than he was not. And so that's why you had all these Lincoln and Family and Lincoln and Puppy, all that stuff. And you had things like this. It's a subcategory of collecting that really you could spend the rest of your life pulling together examples of funerary art dealing with Lincoln or his death or his assassination or whatever, and I think we'll come to some of that. But again, if you just want to have that one Lincoln that is representative of all the really good shots, and a lot of my favorite ones, it's very contemplative. There you are. Pretty much what you need. Can't remember. Did we talk about this one? This was the first day at work. He was clearly already exhausted and clearly sitting there thinking to himself, "Good God, what have I got myself into?" You probably know the story, but perhaps you don't. The reason his right hand is sort of sitting there like that is his hand was so swollen from the handshake that he literally couldn't move it. He just had it. So there's a series of 3 of these, and you have to be sort of a stamp collector to notice, but there's a slight difference in where this is at, but there's 3 separate ones. So you can have fun amusing yourself getting the 3 Brady's, you can get the 3 Brady Anthony's, and you can get the 7,000 copies of it by all the various pirates. You're gonna have a final time just with that guy. All right, what do we got here? Now, subcategory. Probably that's not Lincoln's body.
No.
I used to remember who it was. I don't think it's Calhoun, but in any event, it's wartime. They wanted the local publishers, reputable people, as you can see, copyrighted it. This guy got an artist to make a nice copy of a nice lithograph of that, then plonked it on top of. I think it's Calhoun. Is it Calhoun?
Photoshop.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, we didn't invent Photoshop. Brady could really do it. Gardner could do it, and we'll see a couple when we get in there. But this is a really good example of it. It's kind of neat. And if you needed a picture of full standing Abraham Lincoln because you knew he was tall, you read about it in the paper. This will do it. So it's not Lincoln's body. Yeah. What were you wearing?
No.
Yeah. Okay. Nice chubby. That's the unknown chubby Lincoln, with a nice bust of Andrew Jackson, I think. And I used to know who these were. There was Calhoun, and I think Polk, and a couple of others. And I'm embarrassed I lost track of who these guys are. But again, this is that whole subcategory of collecting. Lincoln's heads were put onto other things in order to give the hometown photographer or the hometown publisher his own original Lincoln photograph. And that's how they marketed it.
Yeah. Chris, I want to save a few minutes for questions.
Okay.
So we've got
I'm going to talk faster because we're going to look at these.
Yeah, we've got just a few minutes left.
All right, well,
and I want to get a couple questions in.
One of my favorite fakes, in a sense, but these are actual photographs. Lincoln was actually a foot taller than Mary, so that's flattering her. And you can see it's copyrighted. There is no known photograph of the 2 of them together. So some enterprising guy said, all right, I can take a couple of Brady's and I'll plonk them together. So he did. So pretty cool. Why not? And in the album, I've got 5 or 6 Lincoln and Mary together that are obviously artist renderings, and some of them are pretty good, some of them are, oh my God. But this is the best one in terms of using actual photographs in a creative way. This is also very famous, and it's important for 2 reasons. One, it's the last year of Lincoln's life. Well, it's not the last photograph, and it's a really excellent Photoshop example. The original photo was this. All this is Photoshop, and that was fairly common doing that kind of stuff. You wanted to enhance a portrait, or you wanted to take a portrait that had that kind of stuff in it, and you wanted to highlight it, you took it out. So this is quite famous photograph. I think it's a Gardner. But that's all enhanced. Whole subcategory of collecting, sculpture. Now, Rogers Groups, I don't know, maybe you know about Rogers Groups, but Rogers had this crazy idea that middle class people should be able to have classical art in their houses. So he made several different sizes, but the 3.5 feet tall, plaster of Paris, beautifully gessoed over and painted white. So it looked almost like marble. And this was a quite famous one. And you can collect Rogers Group CDVs. He did all kinds of stuff. You know, a young boy writing a letter, freed slaves. I mean, there's a whole series of really cool things. But this is relevant to our talk, obviously. This is a good one put out by Rogers. I've got another one in there that obviously Rogers does not put out. So whoever did that one turned it so that they're all looking at you. And I guess he felt he wasn't violating Rogers' copyright for doing that. Subcategory, cartoons, humor, political humor, making fun of them. Obviously this is somebody who's not enamored of inflation or the paper currency, but this is a real twofer. If you collect Civil War currency, my God, you know, this is a must-have, and it's pretty rare. I've not seen that anywhere. I had to pay a fair amount for it, and that's okay. But the fractional currency is itself a cool thing to collect. But here you've got one now with Uncle Abe on it, and you'll notice the Cowlick. You know, that they just like using that one. Uncle Abe's last joke, not so funny, I guess. A real classic. There's 8 or 9 versions of this, and I used to know who the Banjo Player was. He was quite famous, and I had it on a piece of paper and I lost it. So we're going to have to dig that out and find who the Banjo Player is, because there's a photo of him, but Lincoln's head, oh look, the Cowlick, was grafted right on top of it. And there's a whole bunch of those in the album. This was quite popular. It doesn't turn up every day on eBay, but it turns up enough that you shouldn't have to pay $1 million for it. Like I say, there's many variations of that. There's all kinds of cartoons. Lincoln in a spinning wheel saying Abe's last yarn. You know, like that. Lincoln shoving a spoonful of medicine down a fairly blatantly caricatured Irish laborer. Talking about, you know, Lincoln's draft. Some of it's clever, some of it's racist, but it's all in the sort of cartoon comic area. Now, you can collect endless variations of Lincoln's childhood, family life, etc. These are his 2 Hanks cousins, who, as soon as he was assassinated, figured, hey, we can make some money out of this. And there are 2 or 3 versions of this out. But you notice the copyright, 1865. This wasn't 61 or 62, 63. People weren't interested in it, apparently, at that point. But this is Lincoln's family, his Hank's second cousins, I think. And that apparently is the house. That's the house in Springfield. Again, endless variations of that before, during, and after. This particular one is after the assassination, and of course it's, you know, you see the bunting and all that. The more famous one that you do see it's a bit further back, and you see Lincoln and I think Willie standing about there, or there maybe on the porch, and then there's a neighbor kid standing there with his head slightly fuzzy, and afterwards he said, damn it, I went over there to get my picture taken, and a dog barked, and I turned my head just as the picture was taken. But he said, that's really neat. So, anyway, endless variations of Lincoln's house. Emancipation, Lincoln Acts, news. They use these things to spread the news. The Emancipation Proclamation became subject to all kinds of really neat penmanship. There's 2 or 3 versions of things like this, but this is one of the better ones. This is the painting by Carpenter of the Emancipation Proclamation that came out in 1866, actually. But again, you could use the CDVs as, in a sense, the Facebook of the time. You can fill out the history and all that. It's quite a good painting. There are at least 5 or 6 versions of this that I own, which you'll see if you have time. This one is reasonably accurate. You know the tragic story, of course. This guy went mad and ended up killing himself, and it's pretty awful. But this is again, the assassination and the aftermath is a collecting category that you can amass dozens, if not more. This also. There are at least 8 or 9 versions of that. I've got them. This particular one uses actual photographs and is reasonably accurate, except, of course, if you've ever been in that room.
The rubber room?
Yeah, you might be able to get 5 of us in there, if we held our stomachs in. But the Victorian and political convention was, if you were important, by God, you were going to be in this picture. And there's some that are actually, despite the topic, almost ludicrous, because you've got 5 or 6 more people over there, and another 5 or 6 people over there. Pretty much anybody in the country, including poor Mary, was in there. I think the more accurate ones have Robert standing there with his hand down. But anyway, this is a good, clear one that actually is based on photographs of the guys and not other drawings. This is, I think this is damn rare. It's the only one I've ever seen for sale. It's a lithograph, obviously, or an artist's rendering. And the reason I think it's rare is, as you probably know, the actual photograph, the live photograph, was taken by Gurney of New York. And when Stanley found out about it, he sent the military police up there to confiscate them all and to destroy all the prints. So there's only one known actual photograph print left of this photograph showing Lincoln in the casket. So how Gurney got away with publishing the CDV, I do not know. But he did, obviously, because I have one. So at least one of them survived. But again, I've not ever seen this for sale, but surely there was more than one made. So again, this is, if you're going to collect Lincoln assassination material, there's all kinds of interesting things you can find and holes you need to fill, and you can rationalize having a great time with that. Of course, Booth himself and the assassins. That's a well-known actual photograph of Booth, gussing up with somebody. Oh, sorry, somebody whispering in his ear. There's a whole series of Booth being chased and all that. This particular one has Boston Corbett shooting him. We're pretty sure Corbett did it. He certainly took credit for it. But again, this was the news of the day. And then the final category of the Lincoln assassination, of course, is this sort of thing. This is one of a pair. I've got 15 or 20 variations of wreaths and all kinds of stuff. I'm sure there's another 100. And remember, we went right at the beginning. We showed that shot of the Washington Lincoln Apotheosis, and that really would be the way to end this. But we already showed you that. So this again is a subcategory of collecting. Some of these things actually have Lincoln photographs. Others have quite nice lithographs that were contemporary to the time. And this is just a really good one. And I think we have one more here. Yeah, needless to say, he was barely in the grave before people figured they could make money on this. And that's a fairly typical example. I've got several. You could buy glass, you could buy canned goods, you could buy dry goods, you could buy all kinds of stuff. And obviously, if Abe was there, it must have been pretty good stuff. And you'll notice that it's not a Brady, it's a lithograph of it. So I don't want to end on a commercial note, but I think it's a good way to remind us of this. These were people and human beings, and they're doing what they always do, which is try to get through the day. But again, this is a category of collecting in itself. How was Lincoln used in advertising? So that's kind of where we are. I haven't enough time for questions probably, but I got all the pictures in. So.
You did, so thank you. And as Chris mentioned a couple of times, he brought his entire album of images, so it's wonderful. I recommend taking a look.
And it's a work in progress. Even though they aren't baseball covers, they're not too bad.
So we'll take one question.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Talk to you to death.
Go see. We have one question.
Yes.
What's the one that got away?
My cousin Robert had an autograph Lincoln artist. Bless his heart. And I was sure he was going to leave it to me in his will because we were really good friends, and he was a book dealer in New York. But damn it, he left it to his immediate family, which So he did the right thing. But for years I thought I was going to get that because I think a signed Lincoln card to the seat is what, 25,000, 35,000? More than I could even think about wanting in my life. You know, I mean, I wouldn't. I just, you know, it was always out of the question. When I first started out, that would have been 2,000 or 3,000. That's what a car cost. So I would say that one. Cousin Robert's autographed Lincoln.
All right, Chris, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Ron and I are working on, we're going to do an article on this to see what comes out of the woodwork. And he sort of knows he's going to have to do this. We're going to get this stuff together and put out a book. Because it's never really been systematically looked at. And it's an area of photographic history and scholarship that needs to be done. Yeah. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's very good. I enjoyed that.